is now joining us is Johnathan Reynolds of Fox Sports Radio. You can follow him on Twitter at Fox Sports JR. We do appreciate you being on the show. My first question for you, something that I said I wanted to talk about, is Clemson football. I see that you are from South Carolina. Now, Clemson, they beat my nose. I went to Florida State. Obviously, I'm going to root for Florida State. Clemson ruined our season, and now they're headed to the ACC championship. But let me ask you this. When I look at the statistics, it is hard for me to see anybody beat Clemson. They are so great statistically. So when I say that Clemson is going to win a national championship, do you agree or do you disagree, sir?
I think it's very possible because they have very good balance right now. Offensively, they're led by a Heisman Trophy contender in Deshaun Watson, who might be the best quarterback in the country. They have tons of weapons at wide receiver. Wayne Gallman has stepped up at running back and is playing probably the best he's ever played in his career. And then defensively, that defensive team led by Brent Venables, defensive coordinator, is playing very good too. But I think when you kind of delve into the statistics that they're putting forth right now, you have to also consider Clemson's schedule. And I mean, in reality, it's not a great schedule. They beat Notre Dame at home in a driving monsoon. I mean, that's rain that gave South Carolina a record rain, 1,000-year storm, and they were able to beat Notre Dame in that. And then the game against Florida State, and no offense to your Noles, but this isn't the best Florida State team we've seen in the last couple of years. So I think for Clemson right now, it's all about they're going to run the table. There's no doubt about that. The ACC is not great, and they're a great team. So that's a good formula for Clemson. But when they get to the playoffs, I think that's when we're going to tell really how good this Tiger team is this year.
Well, as far as that scheduling argument, I heard that a lot back in 2013 when Jameis Winston had led Florida State to a national championship, and everybody criticized them before they beat Auburn. Oh, they're going to get slammed by Auburn. They didn't play anybody in the ACC. So as far as the argument about the scheduling goes, can't we bring up that 2013 Florida State team and compare them to this Clemson team?
You could, but I guess my retort to that would be how many NFL players does that 2013 Florida State team have versus what Clemson has right now? Clemson has really good players. And, again, Deshaun Watson's a great quarterback. But the talent on Clemson right now, I think that 2013 Florida State team smokes Clemson much like they did at Clemson 2 years ago.
Good point.
Well,
all right.
I'm curious, when it's all said and done, who do you imagine the top four teams for the college football playoff? Who do you imagine those top four teams being at the end of the season?
Well, I think right now, if you go by the playoffs and look at who's going to make their way into it, I think Clemson obviously has got a great shot because it would be a major upset if they lose any of their three remaining games against Wake Forest, Syracuse this weekend, and then, of course, finishing up against South Carolina and probably play North Carolina in the ACC championship game. It's hard to imagine them losing. So if they run the table, them being the number one team right now, they're definitely in. I think Alabama, if I took a kind of an assessment of all the teams in college football right now, who's playing the best right now, I think Alabama's at the peak of their game, and Jacob Coker's finally getting it. Derrick Henry's a 6'3", 241-pound beast, and their defense is the best in the country. So I like Alabama a lot. You probably take Ohio State out of the Big Ten, barring an upset to Michigan State or Michigan to end the year. And then that last team, I think that's where the big question is right now, because you look at the Big 12, and they're going to run the gauntlet. All those teams play each other at the end of the year. So I don't know if anybody can come out of there unscathed. Big game this weekend against for Baylor and Oklahoma, going head-to-head. Notre Dame, I think, has a great shot, but they play Stanford at the end of the year. So that's an elimination game for those two teams. So whoever that fourth team is, it's hard for me to guess. In my poll, I had Baylor, just because I've been impressed with their offensive firepower. But, again, going back to schedule, Baylor hasn't beat any team with an over 500 record this year. So, that fourth team is going to be up in the air.
Well, and you mentioned Alabama. Were you surprised? I know the defense great and everybody is great and everybody knows that, but were you surprised at how well they contained and really shut down Leonard Fournette last week against LSU?
Absolutely. Leonard Fournette, for me, is the best back in America, and for him to get held to 31 yards I thought was pretty astounding. And when you go back into those numbers, I think the things that are even more remarkable is the fact that he had 19 carries. 14 of those carries against Alabama were for 2 yards or less, which is ridiculous when you think about what an animal he is. And here's a crazy stat on top of that. Those 14 tackles were made by 14 different players.
It's impressive stuff. They really dominated that game, and I was just I was kind of like, I was just very surprised. He literally had, I think he had one run where he got like double digits yards-wise on the carry. But, I mean, they just really shut him down. And I agree with you. Everyone's kind of talking about Henry after the week that he had against LSU. But I agree with you. I think Fournette, if you would have put Fournette on Alabama and Henry on LSU, I think Fournette would have had an unbelievable game and Henry would have had a terrible game.
And I agree with that. In LSU right now, I don't think they've done a very good job of utilizing Brandon Harris. He's more of a running quarterback, but they seem to kind of want to make him more of a conservative tossing guy, and I don't think that fits his skill sets. But it's kind of a weird thing about LSU. If you think about it, they've never really had a great quarterback, which is hard to believe considering all the talent they pull from down there in Louisiana. But, no, I would agree with that. I mean, I think for me, watching Fournette play this year, he's easily the most dominant back. Now, Derrick Henry's no slouch. I mean, he's a man-child as well, but I mean, Fournette, to me, is one of the best I've seen, at least probably since Adrian Peterson.
Stephen, we're glad to have you on the show with us. Yeah, I'm on. So I've been saying this past week or so. I still don't think that Clemson belongs in that top spot. Do you agree with me or no?
I mean, it would be hard. It would be hard not to put them there just because they're undefeated right now, and they do have. If you go look at the numbers, I mean, they beat Florida State, they beat Notre Dame at home. I guess you could put Ohio State there because they've won so many games in a row, but Ohio State hasn't beaten anybody to date. Now, they probably passed the eyeball test, and I think they're a much better team with J.T. Barrett, and I think they're going to hit their stride right now. I mean, you could definitely make a case that Clemson doesn't deserve to be number one. I don't have a problem with that, but, I mean, I wouldn't knock them out right now. But here's the thing. I mean, if they run the table, Ohio State runs the table, you're probably going to have Clemson fall down to at least 2 or 3 based on how I see things playing out at the end of the year because Alabama is going to finish with a strong strength of schedule and Clemson's not. So I think that will factor in at the end of the year.
I agree with that. I will put Alabama number one because the way they've been playing after they lost to Ole Miss has just been extraordinary. Speaking of Alabama, LSU went to Tuscaloosa and got their what's handed to them. Leonard Fournette started out the game 9 rushes for 9 yards. After that performance against Alabama, is he your Heisman Trophy winner?
Yeah, I mean, for me, he's been the most impressive player this year. But, it's kind of always biased towards the team that end up having great seasons. So if Alabama rolls and Derrick Henry keeps putting up crazy numbers, I mean, LSU's got a good defense. I mean, he went, 30 carries for 231 yards. I mean, that's a big-time effort against a very good D. So he's going to get a lot of looks right now. I like Fournette probably number one. I would put Derrick Henry in that mix. I think Deshaun Watson from Clemson will start to get more attention because they're going to put up huge numbers these next 3 weeks. I expect them to put close to 70 on Syracuse. So he's going to put up big-time numbers. And then probably Trevon Boykin would be my 4th guy right there. But yeah, if I was going to vote right now, I would have Leonard Fournette first.
Now, with us being down here in Miami, obviously, Canes football is the big fascination. I do want to play a Paul Feinbaum clip for you, and I want to get your reaction on these words.
I think Miami is just an absolutely terrible job. I think this program is bankrupt. I think it has a delusional fan base thinking that this is the 80s and the 90s and maybe even the early part of the new millennium. I don't get it. I don't know why any coach in their right mind would want this job. You have all these former players, and their names are well known. They're tweeting. They want some ownership in the program, and they're not going to accept just some run-of-the-mill coach. Nor will they get a big-name coach. I mean, you said maybe entice a coach. I'd like to know who you're talking about, because what legitimate coach would walk in there with one of the worst stadiums in America with no fan base whatsoever unless they can be a proven winner, which they can't be on day one. I mean, Al Golden was a pretty good hire, and he failed miserably.
How does Johnathan Reynolds react to those words?
Well, we stacked up because I'm right here in Columbia, South Carolina, and obviously Steve Spurrier retired midstream, so a lot of the focus around here has been on who's going to be the next coach at South Carolina. And with that, you kind of take an assessment of all the jobs that are open right now in the country, and I think Southern Cal easily is the best job that's out there. But I would put South Carolina in number 2 just because it's in the SEC, and they have incredible facilities, they have great fan support, and they're going to pay a lot of money. But I would put Miami 3rd, and I think the main thing for Miami, you know this, Broward and Dade County produce more talent than any counties in the entire country. So if you get a guy in there that
Absolutely.
understands how to recruit and that gets the culture of Miami, he's going to bring in players. Now, the facilities certainly are a hindrance. I mean, I don't think anybody really wants to play in a stadium 45 minutes away from campus. I don't think that's ideal at all. But Miami's never really had incredible fan support except for when they're winning. So if you get down there and you can make Miami football cool again and get the right people back involved, I think it's a home run. And again, I mean, just because you have all that talent in your backyard, and that's why I love one of my good friends, Ryan Bartow. He's a recruiting analyst, national recruiting analyst for 247 Sports. Matter of fact, he lives down there in Fort Lauderdale, but he's been on the Mario Cristobal bandwagon for the last 2 years. And for me, when you look around at who would do the best job at Miami, I don't think Miami needs a name. I think Miami needs a guy that can coach but also gets it and can pull in that talent. And I think Cristobal, for me, would be that guy. But I don't agree with Feinbaum. I mean, I think the fan base, you know this. I mean, it's a mile wide but an inch deep. They'll jump on board if you're winning, but if not, there's just too much going on in Miami. Miami's a cool place to be, and if you're not winning, I'll go hang out in South Beach. I don't give a crap. I'm not going to drive 45 minutes to watch horrible football unless I'm a diehard. So I think they get the right coach, gets it, that can recruit, and that gets a buzz going. Al Golden's personality for me never fit Miami. I mean, he's kind of a stoic guy, not somebody that when I think of Miami I think about. But Cristobal is that guy, and I think given what Miami needs right now, he could turn it around pretty quick and get it back to what it needs to be or what it has the potential to be.
Well, one thing I did agree with Feinbaum on is about the Canes fan base being the most delusional fan base in America, just because I have firsthand experience with the Hurricanes fan base. So you disagree with that? The Hurricanes fan base is not the most delusional?
Well, I mean, what are their expectations every year? Their expectations to win the ACC Coastal. If that's their expectations, I don't think that's delusional. I mean, you have North Carolina, who's probably going to win the Coastal this year. You had Duke win it a couple of years ago. I mean, that's not a tough hoe to sled. So I think
the problem is though, their expectations is they want to be top 5 national champions every year, every single year.
Agreed. Well, I think it's Miami, right? If you get there and if you get a coach that can get it done and again pull the talent in and then utilize that talent in the best way possible. Like my plan, if I was going to take over the job at Miami, my first goal would be to win the Coastal, which I think is very, very doable. If you do that, you're automatically in the ACC championship game, and after that, all bets are off because anything can happen. So if you win the ACC in 3 years, that automatically puts you in a scenario where you're competing for a national championship, and I don't think that's unrealistic. Now, I mean, every single year, there's no program in America, maybe barring Alabama, who's going to be a top 5 program every year. So, I mean, if that's what they want, then yes, that's delusional. But do I think that Miami can compete for national championships in the next 5 years? Yes.
Okay, now that's my next question. I was going to ask, I know we don't have much time, but you really think that Miami can win out of the gate? You think that they're a proven winner tomorrow?
I think if they bring back the players they have right now, I think if they're coached up, they could compete definitely in the ACC Coastal. Right now, you have Virginia Tech, just in transition. You got Georgia Tech right now, who's not met expectations this year. You have North Carolina. I really believe Larry Fedora is going to leave after this year at North Carolina. He's been trying to get out. You have Duke, and you have Pitt. I mean, that's not a juggernaut. So, yeah, I mean, I think they can compete. I think they could be in contention to win the Coastal next year, absolutely.
Last question, we'll go ahead and get you out of here, and I'm sure you're probably going to take the politically correct way out, and I would not blame you whatsoever, but we have a poll up just because we had an interview with somebody earlier, and there was a lot of complaints from the people texting the show, and the poll question is, how do you feel about female sports journalism? Either A, they're great, or B, stay in the kitchen. What you got, Reynolds?
Well, I mean, it's actually sort of a pet peeve for me. Like, when I turn on the football on Saturday afternoon and I hear Doris Burke calling a game, I automatically know that's not a good game, and I'm pretty much tempted to turn the channel. That's just, I mean, I like them to be pretty. I like them to stand on the sideline. I don't really care what they have to say, and that's no offense to them. I just don't. I mean, there's some that I'll listen to that are experts in their field, maybe in women's tennis, maybe Debbie Antonelli that's a women's basketball expert.
Jesus Christ.
But aside from that, I mean, I honestly, and I don't think I'm out of the norm in that. I think most people and most dudes that I know, if you ask them, they don't give a crap what they have to say. That's why they're all hot. They put them on the sideline to be hot and be pretty. They don't put ugly chicks on the sideline. Why? because nobody listens anyway.
What a great answer. I love that answer. Awesome. Johnathan Reynolds of Fox Sports Radio. You can follow him on Twitter at Fox Sports JR. We do appreciate you being on the show, sir, and you're welcome back anytime after that answer.
All right, guys. Have a great one. Thank you so much.